Welcome to the listeners of TALRadio English, CXO Showtime with your host Akshay. We bring in global CXOs on this platform to share their journey to success. Our guest today is empowering social enterprises and high-impact individuals to make a positive impact. He contributes to the Huffington Post and serves on the American Cancer Society's National Relay for Life leadership team. He has been honored with Eagle Scout and Mary Gates Leadership Scholarship. A grand welcome to Mark Horoszowski, CEO and co-founder Moving Worlds. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Most welcome. Mark, your parents have come to the US with literally nothing in their hands, and they still believe in helping others. Did this shape your attitude towards life and character?
Absolutely. My mother was, at a young age, was a political refugee from, at the time, for former Yugoslavia. My dad had escaped communist Poland. And as hard as those journeys were, the value of community and human connections were really what helped both, and both their, what remained of their families find their footing in the US. And so I was born in the US after they had met in the US. And they had connected and created into other communities of other people that were also immigrants to the United States. And so growing up, those communities were very strong, and they really supported each other, right? Because I think anybody going through those experiences a lot of hardship, and there was support when you had people who had walked similar paths. Right. And I think similarly, there was a big appreciation for, maintaining and passing on culture, right? Kind of bringing over the best of their fond memories from, their childhoods. And so growing up, I was a part of community events and both formally established volunteer activities or bazaars or fundraising, but I think also just helping families when they were in need. And also receiving help and support when we were in need. And so that idea and that focus on build and support a community, but also be aware of how national and international issues can affect communities, I think has really had a profound influence on me as a person.
Absolutely. So very true to the core, right? I mean, your culture shapes your character, your attitudes, and the whole perspective towards your life. It's a very important aspect in one's personality and the overall journey in one's lifetime. When we talk about lifetime, you have started out, you've been working a lot as a volunteer right from your school days. Can you share some impacting the social work that could make our lives a lot more better?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, kind of coming from the same family kind of and social structure that I was a part of, right? We were engaged in community. And so when I went into elementary school, middle school, high school, I was engaged in volunteer activities. I was in Scouts, as you had mentioned in my introduction, a program, right, where we would engage in outdoor activities, learn basic life skills, and also engage in very consistent community service. When you're a kid, that's just fun. When you start to, mature a little bit, not that I was mature by high school by any means, but when you mature a little bit, you start to also realize that these types of experiences deepen social connections. They give you leadership experience. They teach you how to both influence and also collaborate with people that are very different from yourselves. And I think that early exposure to working across very different socioeconomic groups, political groups, education level groups gave me a lot of early experience that I still call on to this day, right? How do you work well with others from different backgrounds? How do you effectively manage programs and projects towards a deadline? How do you have fun in the process, and how do you keep innovating as time goes on? So I think those early volunteer experiences, they helped get me into college. I remember graduating from college. I had continued to be a volunteer through university. I remembered in my first job interviews, I swear half of every interview was about my volunteer experience, right? And in retrospect, it was because that's what was different and unique about me. I had so much volunteer experience that kind of became something that when people were interviewing me, they saw that, oh, this indicates that this person takes initiative, that this person can organize communities, that he can collaborate well, that he can innovate and be creative, especially when not having many resources. And so I think that those experiences from early on just kept kind of compounding on each other to teach me skills that ultimately were seen as valuable in the workplace. And for me personally now, I think are hugely valuable to me as a leader of an organization.
Obviously, like our listeners are like a lot of people and including a lot of parents as well. To pass on a message, I believe you would definitely want to recommend to encourage their kids to get involved with social activities, volunteer activities right from the childhood so that they become more compassionate as they grow, right, Mark?
Absolutely, right. I think, Malcolm Gladwell popularized this idea of 10,000 hours, but that's actually borrowed from other researchers who shared that in order to develop skills in anything, whether it's an instrument or leadership or a sport, you have to have a lot of very intentional practice, right? There's almost the age-old debate, right? Are leaders made or are they born, right? And I think the research is actually quite compelling that leaders are made, and they're made through real experiences. And so I think that's, especially beyond the classroom, beyond your day-to-day job, wherever you are based on your stage of life, volunteering meaningfully and thinking about how you can do a better job and how you can develop new skills to be more effective. What you're doing is logging against those 10,000 hours of practice that you need in order to be really, truly great at something. Certainly communities need volunteering, you're making an impact, but if you're open to it too, it also changes you, it builds your own skills, and it helps you grow as a person and as a professional.
Absolutely. You have also worked in a lot of prestigious firms. You left them to pursue social work. What made you completely dedicate yourself to social entrepreneurship?
There's a story that I tell. I worked at one of the biggest accounting firms in the world that I think is quite well known. And I believe that I got the job actually because of my volunteer experience, right? I shared earlier, right? My interviews out of college were half about the volunteer work that I had done. When I started working there and when things got busy, I actually remember asking if on one of my weekend days, if I could travel to go speak at a conference that I was invited to speak at as a volunteer. And I couldn't because there was too much work to do, even though it was on the weekend. And I always felt a contradiction in that, here I was effective and hired because of my volunteer experience, but now that I was working full time, I couldn't continue to volunteer and give back. And that to me felt like a contract was broken. And from there, I ended up leaving and joining a smaller company that focused in healthcare marketing. And my rationale for doing that was a lot of my volunteer work was in the healthcare space. And so I wanted to be closer to the mission. And I also felt that smaller firm wouldn't be as beholden to investors or shareholders or owning partners who were prioritizing profits above all else. And we grew and I was really proud of a lot of the work that we did. But when we hit the Great Recession about a decade ago, a little more now, crazy to say, we made it through the Great Recession. And on the way out, I wanted to do more to support the nonprofit industry. But the owner of the group of companies had a different plan as he was gearing for retirement. And he had every right to make the financial decisions that he was making. And I can certainly understand that, especially given stage of life. But again, I felt there was a little bit of a break in contract, right? Where I had signed up for something that was more mission driven and it had become profit driven when things got challenging. And again, I totally understand that. I still consider that gentleman a mentor to me. There was also kind of a break in contract. And so I really wanted to learn, how can I join an organization where the contract is clear, where even if times get tough, or if there is an acquisition, or if there is a pivot in business model, that the focus on caring for employees and the world at large will always be prioritized alongside profits. And at the time, this was just a couple of years after Muhammad Yunus wrote the book around social business. And the idea of social entrepreneurship, I think, was starting to pick up, even though it was far from popular. And so I decided that's what I wanted to learn about. I had applied for fellowships. I thought about going back to school. I didn't get any of the fellowships that I had applied to. I didn't think that a master's program was right for me, or a PhD program. And so I thought, you know what? Time and time again, the thing that's been most valuable to me has been my volunteer experience. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go volunteer with social enterprises around the world. I'm going to do it for a year. I'm going to spend, the meager savings that I did have on doing just that. And that is going to be both my education, but also my career realignment. So I spent a year traveling, volunteering, supporting social enterprises in Nepal, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Argentina, a few others virtually. And that kind of became a big turning point where I really saw firsthand that these types of structures could exist. They could generate not extreme wealth, but they could create wealth for the entrepreneurs and the employees with more shared structures and more equity, and they could solve real problems that the world needed to address. So, returning from that experience, all of that was still there. And then the growing significance of the climate crisis just really, I think, accelerated my interest in ensuring that everything I was doing next was focused on building a more effective social enterprise movement.
It is always a saying that, right? You find happiness and your purpose of life is in following your passionate, or following what you're passionate about, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely like walking the right way. I mean, to lead your life and try and be happy and contented in what we are doing. That's very important. Thank you very much, Mark, for taking that decision.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, thank you. There's a quote that I love, and now, of course, I'm blanking on who said it, but the quote is, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is for you to come alive, right?
Such a beautiful quote.
It's good, right? Yeah, and I think
I
think that of like, if you can align that with something that will create positive impact.
I think you have also traveled the whole world in about a year or so. You've been traveled into many countries. How is it traveling like? What have you learned and experienced? We would want to listen more about your experiences as part of your world tour.
Oh, wow. Well, how much time do you have?
I have all the time for goodness, Mark. I have all the time for goodness.
Another quote that I think about a lot, right? Especially today, where the work that I do is focused on, global systems change. How do we build the skills of professionals and build the capacity of social enterprises in such a way that we can actually create a more sustainable and equitable global economy? And so I'm always thinking about systems. I'm always thinking about, policy, about these global partnerships, right? Huge changes, right? Where if you make even just a small impact, right, the ripple of it is massive. So I think about that a lot, but my experience of traveling in kind of the immersive way that I did, right, where I was really joining communities, finding the people that were spearheading really powerful initiatives, and then just supporting them when it was asked for. What it taught me, right, is that like small is beautiful, right, which is actually a title of another fantastic book. And I think about that a lot, this notion that small is beautiful. As humans, if we go to a grocery store for, our sustenance, if we go to a doctor for our healthcare, if we go out to a restaurant for some celebration, that all of these different small experiences actually are very enriching when they're delivered by the people and organizations that really care and prioritize their communities. And there's another quote, right, that like all politics is local, right? Even these huge national, international issues, right? They're so often based and informed by like what is happening to me in my community. And I think that's what my global experience actually really, really taught me, right? The trend was that in every place, when you found people that cared for their communities, those communities were better. And that creates systems change, right? Changing a system doesn't always come down and change the communities, right? It's actually the changing of communities, the changing of entrepreneurs that ripple up to change a global system. I think for me continues to be this really grounding effect that having that experience, having those connections, having that exposure shows me that without a shadow of doubt, the most important thing that we can all do as individuals is positively influence the area immediately around it. You know, now as I'm kind of working on these global system change, I'm always reminded of that. And it really helps me just make sure that we're always putting people first, right? We're always putting communities first, and then remaining very principled and committed to doing that for people in their communities.
Absolutely. And then you went on to start Moving Worlds. What's the vision for the whole establishment?
The question, right, is how can we create an organization that is going to make a lasting change on the world? And for me, that led to the question, which is, well, you know, what are some of the biggest problems that I am uniquely positioned to tackle, right? And so, you know, having a master's in accounting, spending time at a global accountancy, working in marketing and business development, really felt like thinking about the power of business and structure of business that right now, right, creates terrible wealth inequalities, degrades our planet rapidly. How can we change that? And if you can change the global economy, then you can really make a lasting impact. And, you know, I came from philanthropy, I came from the nonprofit sector, and I still volunteer. But I think it's really important to look at, as an individual, what is your biggest lever? So to give an example, every year, the global economy accounts for over 120 trillion US dollars of GDP. Global philanthropy, all the monies that go into just philanthropy are like $400 billion. You're not even at 1% of global GDP. So no amount of philanthropy can ever right the wrongs, right? It can't even address 1% of the wrongs of the global economy. So at Moving Worlds, what we're really trying to do is say, how do we shift that $120 trillion in a way that can actually be more equitable, be more just, and be sustainable? And our belief is the best way to do that is to go to social enterprises and support them because they are the ones working in their communities. They are the ones delivering the most regionally or nationally relevant solutions that are being created by their own people, for their own people, and are prioritizing their people above generation for the few. And that's what we do at Moving Worlds, to say, how can we support these social enterprises, but also do so in such a way that we can use their success to change the entire global economy? And that comes to life in a number of different ways. We start with the social enterprises and say, you know, beyond access to capital, of course you need money, but for anything non-financial, how can we help you, right? We have learning, we have community, we have networking, and then we have access to a global expertise network of people that can volunteer their skills with these social enterprises. Then to the professionals that are looking to do more in their careers and make a bigger impact, we offer educational and community programming for professionals that want to support the social enterprise movement, either by joining social enterprises or integrating social enterprises into their own business. And then we also partner with companies like Microsoft, PayPal, SAP, Unilever, and others to help these big businesses realize how they can partner with social enterprises. So we help them find social enterprises We help their employees learn about how they can create new innovations by partnering with social enterprises. And there's some other stakeholders that we also incorporate into this, right? Governments that are trying to boost their social enterprises, or impact investors and accelerators that want to provide more ongoing support to social enterprises. We partner with all these different stakeholders for the sake of really building up the social enterprise movement. So now, to make that a little bit more real, what that means is if you're a social enterprise, you can apply for support via our platform, and you can access on-demand learning modules for you and your team. You can connect with other social enterprise leaders. You can find mentors. You can find high-skilled volunteers. And then you can also ask for connections to impact investors or to corporate buyers. And then as a professional, if you come on, you can apply to our programs. You get access to networking, peer-based community groups, all focused on learning. And then, of course, you can serve as a volunteer. And then the corporates, we start with strategy sessions where we say, there's a lot of talk right now about companies trying to achieve environmental and social governance targets, or ESG targets. So we help them think about, let's first design a strategy on how they can achieve those ESG goals by educating and engaging their employees. And then we take over the ongoing management of educating their employees through our programs, and also connecting their employees to volunteer with social enterprises. And then importantly, help these employees find social enterprises that they can then partner with at the business level. So volunteering really kind of becomes a gateway for more ongoing education and ultimately partnerships, and through that, more impact.
You did bring out a very important aspect of the overall efforts of Moving World. You did mention that you're working on the ESG goals, right? How many such UN ESG goals are you covering as part of the overall vision?
Our day-to-day is really around partnerships, right? Like number 17, that's where we focus the most. But our social enterprises actually span all of the different ESG targets. We say is that if you are a social enterprise, as long as you are aligned with at least one of the sustainable development goals, you can get access through our support network. Certainly some are a little more popular than others, tackling gender-based inequalities, climate change, life on land, life below water. Those are some of the most popular ones, but certainly we support them all.
What can one expect if we want to enter into the fellowship with Moving Worlds, and how is it going to help us all?
Yeah, so the fellowship program that you mentioned is called the Moving Worlds Institute, and it's a program for professionals. We've supported professionals from over 50 countries have joined the fellowship. Once you apply, if you're accepted into the program, you join a 6-month cohort of other professionals that, like you, believe in using their skills to make a bigger and more positive impact on the world, to align their careers in such a way that they're making an impact not just through volunteering or through giving, but really integrating in their entire career. And because it's built for people who are already working professionals, we believe that experience is the most important thing. And so we teach certainly some frameworks and some concepts, and we give people resources and tools and frameworks to be more effective. Most importantly, we connect the individuals in our institute directly with social enterprises where they can also volunteer their skills. And they'll volunteer directly with social enterprises, but in tandem, they will also be working with their peers on case studies or on other projects. So there's this real fun and energizing way where people are learning a concept on Monday, talking about it, in a case study virtually and asynchronously, and then directly applying that as they're supporting a social enterprise. So it's this really rapid learning, peer communication through critical conversation, and then also through direct experience. And that program lasts for 6 months of weekly and monthly programming, combined with a volunteering project that people do on their own schedule, some full-time, some part-time, some over an hour a week, over all 6 months. Some do it in a 2-week sprint. But once that finishes, then there's a kind of a celebration and a reflection, some career guidance, some storytelling, some resume work. And then from there, people join our global community where they stay engaged as alumni, get access to job opportunities, networking opportunities. So yeah, it's a growing community, over 300 people right now. Now people from 50 countries. It's a really, really inspiring group of people.
Great. And how has been the journey with Moving Worlds from the establishment? I believe you are already receiving great response from society, from professionals, and a lot of corporations out there. What's your feeling like as part of your overall journey?
I think probably in many ways, it's similar to any entrepreneur's journey. Lots of highs, lots of lows, lots of struggles, lots of celebrations. I think that journey continues. Going from an idea to now a global team of 13 people and growing, it continues to be exciting, really forces me to keep learning. And I think, especially over the last 2 years, has really focused me to do a lot of learning, not just on, professional skills, leadership skills, management skills, scale-up skills, but also just on human skills, right? Understanding my own emotions, becoming more vulnerable, being a better coach to team members. So it's continued to be an amazing, learning adventure and ever-changing. So certainly not, I couldn't have ever imagined that the experience would be, what it is. And certainly if I was going back in time, I would do many things differently. I'd also do a lot of things the same way, because I'm really, really proud of the team that we have and the work that we're doing and the impact we're creating.
I think you were also associated with the American Cancer Society. Can you elaborate on your involvement with the American Cancer Society?
Both my parents are cancer survivors. So at a young age, in high school, I got involved as a volunteer with the American Cancer Society. When I went to university, I helped start a big fundraising initiative for the American Cancer Society. This was also at the same time that, believe it or not, there was a time this existed, right, where online donations were new. And we were one of the first groups to really embrace the idea of online giving. And we were really, really successful. So then I was asked by the American Cancer Society to help train other communities. And it actually expanded not only in the US, we actually partnered with a lot of international organizations. So I helped also support trainings for cancer groups in Europe, in Australia, in Malaysia, really, really around the world on how to improve the way that we engage communities, increase education and advocacy to help people live healthier lifestyles and detect cancer early. And then, of course, also fundraising to support research. I also got involved in advocacy efforts, right? Meeting with legislators to help promote cancer funding and cancer education. And so, yeah, became very, very involved at the national and ultimately even international levels. Most recently, I'm actually not serving in this capacity anymore, but most recently I was on the national strategy team that was helping set strategy for volunteer engagement in the United States. And that was a really cool experience to be doing that while also doing my work at Moving Worlds, right? Because that's kind of the whole mission of Moving Worlds, right? Is to say, hey, by volunteering, you learn more and then it can be more effective. And so to be volunteering while I was working really felt like I was living our values.
And you were also involved with lecturing on corporate responsibility. Isn't that a role very challenging? Any experiences that you could share with us on it?
Yeah, because of the work that we were doing at Moving Worlds, supporting companies like Microsoft and others achieve their own corporate social responsibility and ESG targets by engaging employees. A university here in the state of Washington was building out a degree program for corporate social responsibility. And I was asked to be one of the founding adjunct faculty members. And so, yeah, I taught 1 quarter per year. So still a full credit load quarter, a couple classes per week, homework assignments, right? Students, the whole deal. And, I really enjoyed it, right? I think oftentimes when you work in any specific industry or sector, you become too ingrained in your own echo chamber, right? You use the same buzzwords, you use too many acronyms, you overly complicate what should be simple. And so, in teaching, there's a great quote from Richard Feynman who says, anytime I think I understand something, I try and explain it to a kindergartner. And if I can't explain it to a kindergartner, right, to a 5-year-old, then I don't understand it fully enough. And, I was teaching at the university level, right? These weren't 5-year-olds by any means, but it did really force me to think about how do you make these concepts applicable to people that are preparing to enter the workforce? And how can you make sure that it's relevant to them, right? Because no employer is going to look at the student and say, oh, you took a class on corporate social responsibility, I'm going to hire you, right? That doesn't help students, right? And so it became a really interesting challenge to say, okay, how can I actually help students build their employability skills as well as their global kind of consciousness, so that when they do become employed, right, they live a more purposeful and passionate profession. And I think that was the most challenging part, right, of saying, okay, how do you take these lessons that are very corporate, a lot of buzzwords, and make it relevant to people, and make it relevant to students? But I love the challenge. I loved working with students. They call you out, they make you better, and ultimately, you're right, they're the future, right? They're going to be leading us. So it was a lot of fun to build that curriculum and teach that program. And currently, my teaching is actually on pause, but I'm looking forward to getting back into it.
Yeah, certainly such a very respectable profession by far than any other thing, right? You're grooming people who are going to build communities and become leaders for tomorrow. Yeah, that's so very important in one's lifetime as well. Another thing is that you were a social worker all through your life. Are there any special moments of experience in that journey that stayed with you forever?
I remember this one moment that, we had started this fundraising event at the University of Washington, where I was a student that was supporting the American Cancer Society. And it was actually another lady, Allison, that had really kind of started it. And she had already had it kind of going and off the ground, and we got introduced. And then I kind of came in to help. And then when she left university, then I led that event along with another wonderful lady, Sadie, and we kind of grew this event. We made it even bigger. We made it even more successful. We raised even more money. At one point, with online fundraising, out of like over 4,000 similar events, we were the number one fundraising activity of this type, doing online fundraising. And I remember, it kind of culminated with this actually overnight ceremony to honor and respect people that had passed through cancer, to fighting back and doing more in our communities to support those being affected by cancer and then help prevent cancer as a life-threatening disease for future generations. And it culminated in this overnight event. You actually, at one point, there was this big candlelight ceremony. So you can imagine, thousands of people in a place with candles and kind of somber but uplifting music. And we had coordinated some things in this experience to kind of really add to the emotional impact of it. And I remember the final coordination we had to do kind of from up high. We were in a stadium, so we were up high, and we had exceeded our fundraising goal. We had exceeded our recruitment goals. It was the best event we had ever done. And here's this like super emotional moment. And you're just kind of watching it unfold. And then I, for whatever reason, right, the thought struck me that like next year I won't be in a spot. I'm not going to see this experience, ever again. And what do I want from that? And my first thought went to the person, Kelly, who was leading it the next year, of like, I want Kelly to make it even better. And I'm going to do anything I can to help with that, right? Even though I'll be gone. And And I think thinking back on that moment, that for me cemented a really important principle in leadership, right? Which is the true mark of a leader is not what you accomplish, but it's what happens after you leave. And I think that to me is really, that has really stayed with me as I've even thought about growing, Moving Worlds, right? The goal of Moving Worlds, right, is it's impossible that I can be the leader of it forever, right? And so whenever I move on, I want it to do even better, right? And that means investing not only in the organization and its operational efficiency and its impact efficiency and its financial efficiency and all these things, but it also brings it back to like the people, right? Kind of this people first mindset where we also along this growth path need to invest in the next generation of people, of humans, of leaders. And I think that for whatever reason, that experience just really, really stays with me is why that is so important.
Right. With all those experiences and memorable occasions, right? If you look back into the history and then you look at the lives that you have touched, how does it feel?
I want to say thank you for saying that. I feel like I'm so often looking up the mountain of all the things that we still have to accomplish that it's hard, I think, to kind of give pause and maybe, self-congratulate a little bit on some of the impact. You saying that makes me feel pretty good in the moment. But I think, maybe I'll connect this to the concept of like interconnectivity, right? And, spiritually, religiously, I don't know where you stand or where all your listeners stand. I think the thing that I believe is like very inspired by nature, right? Where if you look at healthy forests, you have this like deep interconnection between different plants above ground, below ground, fungal, fungus networks, mycelial networks. And, I believe that kind of interconnection of different species, right, is very grounding and connecting and important. And as I think about what you said in terms of how does it feel to kind of to make an impact, to know that you've touched all these lives, the way I think about it is maybe just to say like, I think that's just my job, right? That's if I'm here and I'm not touching lives, right? Then what am I doing? Why am I pulling from an ecosystem if I'm not giving more back to that ecosystem, right? Which I guess is, to even use the name of your foundation and radio show here in my response, right? I think that to me just feels, it feels grounding, right? It feels like I'm here doing what I should be doing and what I think people should be doing. So it feels grounding and feels a little comforting, but also I think it feels energizing, right? To be able to say, when you put your mind to it, when you just take those steps, even if it's scary or hard or whatever, you actually do make an impact on others. And if you've done it in the past, if you learn a little bit more, and if you work a little bit smarter, you can do an even better job of that in the future. And so I think that reflection and that pause to ground and then use that to energize, do more with whatever comes next feels like some really good rocket fuel into the veins that I can use for no matter how hard the journey is ahead of us.
Absolutely, Mark. Such a very touching thought process that you just talked about, right? I mean, we need to be thinking about what we are giving it back to the nature. I think it's all about, are we just on the receiving end, or do we want to be just on the receiving end, or do we also want to be contributing to where we are taking it from, right? Well, you got me thinking a lot, Mark. And I mean, I am becoming a lot more grounded. Okay, thank you very much.
Success.
I got imagining myself. Okay, what am I doing to giving it back to the society, right? I mean, because we always keep taking things, right? I mean, it's so very difficult to take time out and start thinking about, okay, what am I giving it back? I mean, how can I help the society? So with that thought in the mind, your message to the present generation and their responsibility towards the society.
so many different needs or issues or causes that people tend to care about, individually, right? Ask an individual what they care about, and they're going to say, oh, this, the environment, people, community, pets, all these things. And then you see the number of challenges, right? Look on social media or look on the news, right? And you just see like challenge after challenge. And what happens is I think it's human nature to end up, with, what we call decision paralysis, right? Too many choices, too surmountable of a problem. So I think my message is what's most important is that you just take a first step. Not that it's the right step or the best step, but you just start. And what we have found time and time again is the best way to start is just give yourself a small, very achievable target. So let's say you're inspired by this and you want to start volunteering. The starting block for this is not necessarily going and jumping into a huge volunteer project. Or even jumping onto a volunteer matching website to find projects. The very first thing you should do, and you should do it within the next 5 minutes. In fact, you should do it in the next 30 seconds, is to send a text message or an email to someone that cares about you and say, my goal in the next month is to start volunteering with an organization that I think I can make a difference at. Will you help me? And to start with something so simple, to build a little bit of peer accountability, a little bit of social structure, a little bit of social support will not only make it more likely that you will achieve that goal, but also that person might be inspired and join it with you. And then from there, once you have a social, kind of a commitment to start something very soon, and now you have some social pressure to make sure you actually do it, to then say, what am I best at, right? And you might be best at humor. You might be best at motivating others, at managing projects, about writing code or whatever. And just say, okay, I'm going to go do what I'm best at. And I'm going to go find the first organization, not the best organization, not the dream organ, just the first organization that needs my skills or my passions or my time. And I'm just going to go sign up for something small. And I'm just going to go do it. And I think these small initial first incremental steps will help you build some social structure and support so that you'll do it and hopefully inspire others to join it with you. But then you'll also really quickly see and learn, and I think that's the most important part, is that you'll learn really quickly where are you going to be most effective. And it's possible that your first volunteer project might not go well. It might not be energizing to you, or you might not feel like you are impactful. But the goal is not to change the world in the next month. The goal is to learn and to just take then another step afterwards, to use that learning to then find a more precise volunteer project. And then from there, right, with that experience, then you can start to think about more and more of, okay, how can I now take this and maybe even build it into my day-to-day job, or have it as a supplement to my education. So take a small step. If you haven't yet, now take out your phone and send a text or message or an email to somebody and just say, hey, I really want to do a volunteer project and start something in the next 30 days. Will you help me find something? And then hopefully that connection leads to you taking the next step.
Absolutely, Mark. I think it was wonderfully carved out. I think you made it a full circle. We started with the saying that you talked about, small is beautiful, right? And then we talked about taking these small steps and then going the 10,000-mile rule. I mean, I'm now thinking about a small baby taking that first step and slowly trying to walk and then run fast. And think about Usain Bolt. I mean, he also took his first step as a baby, right? That's so very wonderfully crafted out, Mark. Absolutely thrilled to talk to you, Mark. Pleasure to have you hosted on our show. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, really my pleasure. Thanks for having me and for the great questions. It was fun to share about this and reflect on some things I obviously hadn't before. So thank you very much. And thanks for all the work that you do to touch and inspire others. It's really important and it's really needed. And for everybody that took the time to listen, really appreciate you committing time to this. I think that says a lot about you, and I'm touched that you would listen. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day ahead, and all the good luck to you for your future endeavors.
All right. Thank you. You as well.